Hi, welcome to Perth City Talk Special Edition. I'm Angeline, and tonight we're going to be talking to a few of the speakers at the Perth Poetry Festival 2015 at the Northbridge Piazza. Here we are with Mar Buckner, who's the chairperson of WA Poetry Inc. Hi, how are you?
Fine.
That's good. So what's your purpose in WA Poetry?
Well, I'm currently chair of the committee, but I've been on the committee for a few years. We operate as collectively as possible, so not like I'm the boss. But the main job of the committee is running the annual festival, which has been going for 10 years now. And as well as that, there's an online journal of poetry and haiku, and we also help auspice some other poetry organisations.
How many people does the committee consist of?
About 8 or 10. It's open to anybody who's interested in helping out run the festival and the other activities that we do. We've got a variety of ages, and, roughly even gender balance it's been most years. So it's quite a diverse organisation, and that's one of the things that we're committed to at the festival, is ensuring that there's a diversity of voices represented.
What sort of work goes into putting something like this together?
Well, the main thing early in the year is getting in funding applications. We've been generously supported by City of Perth for the last few years. That takes a bit of work, but it just means brushing up on the last one, and just locking in the sponsors, booking the venues, and finding the appropriate poets. We just call for nominations from our membership through our email list, and then we decide who we're going to choose and what basis we're going to choose them on. So this year we've got an emerging international guest from Malaysia, Angelina Bong. We picked 2 established Perth poets, Peter Jeffrey and Rose Nanson. We've got 2 young emerging Perth poets, Chucky and Alexis Latif. But we aim for a diversity of voices to represent the diversity of Perth poetry as it is.
You mentioned an online journal earlier, so what was the website for that and what do you do with it?
That's at wapoets.net.au, and there are 2 small subcommittees that edit the poetry and the haiku separately, and then they get posted online quarterly. Submissions are open from any of our members, and I'll rephrase that. And at the launch of the festival, prizes are awarded for the best haiku and the best poetry, and highly commended from the committee. The journal publishes several hundred poems and haiku every year from our members.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So here we have Nicholas Haslock, the keynote speaker for WA Poetry Inc. Hi, how are you today?
Very well, indeed, glad to be here.
So what's your purpose at WA Poetry Inc?
Well, I've been a poet in the States for quite a few years, and so I know people in the room here. And it's something I did quite a long time ago, and I've written a few books, and I've also written fiction, novels, and so on. I've written about 11 novels over the years. The last novel I wrote was a book called Rooms in the City. It was about espionage behind the Gallipoli campaign, so to that extent it was topical. And the novel I wrote before that was called Dismissal, about the Whitlam dismissal in 1975 when the government was dismissed. And so most of these novels have a kind of a sense of intrigue and mystery about them. So, and in some of these books I've worked in some poetry as well.
What's your writing style for your poems and your books?
I suppose I'm mostly a city-based or urban sort of poet, dealing with themes and scenes that you see around the streets and personalities, more so than being a nature poet.
At what age did you start writing your poems, and when did you find a passion to do what you do?
Well, both my parents were writers, so I suppose I was writing in my teens, and when I got to university I was going on writing at that time, and I suppose I've been writing ever since.
Is there anyone that you look up to or anyone who made you want to write?
Well, it's always the case that one's tastes change. I mean, soon after I left school, and I'm going back some distance now, but T.S. Eliot and people like that were I admired, but in more recent years, I mean, the Australian poets like Les Murray and Geoffrey Lehman, and overseas Seamus Heaney and people like that, Ted Hughes.
So for your keynote speech tonight, what was the topic and why did you choose to do it?
Well, I wanted to try and say something that I thought would be of interest to people at the festival, and the theme I chose in a way was the question, what does it mean to be a poet? And I suggested that most poets have a duality in their nature. That on the one hand, they're a kind of aerial voyager or observer who sees the entire scene, but on the other hand, there's always the sense of the fraught outsider, someone who's at one remove from many of the activities in society and what is being done, and it's the conjunction of these two things which often produces the best poetry. A creative writer is also always concerned with the slightly mysterious things outside the world of fact, and I suppose if I have any message for young people or would-be writers, it's the importance of constantly exercising one's imagination to try and see beyond the world of fact what things startle us, enlighten us, make us see more clearly the world around us. I suppose that's my message if I have one.
That's great. Thank you so much. Here we have Danny Gunsberg, who's a poet and musician. Hi, Danny.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah.
So what genre of music do you specialise in?
I used to play like rock and roll and pop songs, but now as I'm becoming a solo performer, I do a lot of ballads. Maybe you call it folk or folk ballads, and that's mostly what I do. Yeah, yeah.
Is there anyone who inspired you to write your songs or sing the way you do?
I mean, I grew up listening to the Beatles. I thought Lennon and McCartney and Harrison were the brilliant songwriters. I love the songwriting tradition, love Bob Dylan, really like Paul Kelly, love Leonard Cohen, Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, all the 60s music. I just immersed myself in 60s music when I was growing up. Yeah, yeah.
So at what age did you start to write your music since you grew up listening to those songs?
Well, I sort of started writing poetry when I was about 13, and then I learnt the guitar when I was about 15, so I started writing songs when I was about 15, 16, yeah.
So one of your songs that you sang tonight was called Secret Garden?
Secret Window.
Secret Window. Who was it about and why did you write it?
I wrote it because it was a bit tongue-in-cheek. This internet dating seems a bit lopsided. There's a lot more men interested in women than there are women interested in men, and women get to pick and choose their men, and that annoyed me, so I wrote a song about it. Yeah.
So it was from personal experience with someone, yeah. So now it's the 21st century, and in the digital age, obviously everything's more advanced, everything's quicker. You can go on the internet, search someone up, and look at their music. How has that benefited you, and what type of music have you published to the world, and how have you done it?
I have published CDs, and so the digital age has helped me publish CDs. It's much easier to publish a CD than a record. If you're back in the 80s or the 70s, you needed producers and record labels to produce records because they were so expensive. Obviously, I've got my own little digital recording equipment, and I've released a CD called Eternal Soul, and I can do it fairly easily. People can get together and record their music much easier than it was back in the old days, yeah.
So where can the people watching access your music now?
If you go to SoundCloud, and you look up Danny Gunsberg, spelt Danny and then Gunzburg, Gunsberg, there's some songs on SoundCloud that are free to listen to. I don't think you can download them because I didn't want people to download for free at the moment, but maybe I'll make them downloadable one day. So yeah,
Thank you so much for your time.
thanks a lot.
I was diagnosed with depression, I think, when I was 12, about then, so pretty young age. I went through primary school being the brunt of all the bullies, as probably I feel like a lot of us would have been.
Today we're here with Chucky. Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
So I'm aware that you're 21. So at what age did you start writing poems?
I started writing at a fairly young age. I sort of, obviously everyone does poetry in primary school and such, but I really started writing my own stuff of my own accord around 11 or 12. And that was sort of influenced a lot by just events that were happening in my life and the need to have a release of things I was feeling and thinking.
Yeah. I'm aware that a lot of your topics of your poems are about mental health. Where did that come from, and how did you try to voice that message?
I sort of, like I said, had events in my life. So around the age of 12, I was diagnosed with depression, and my release for that was writing poetry. So obviously from there, a lot of my poems have begun to feature my past experiences as a young kid growing up with depression, and that's grown into me wanting to help other people, because I found that although poetry helped me, I felt like that was just me trying to help myself, and I think it's really important to have other people helping other people out there. So I write a lot about mental illness and abuse and domestic violence and stuff like that, sort of as a means hoping to help people who otherwise might not realise that they're not alone and that there is help out there.
What's your writing style when you write your poems?
I sort of developed my own style. I studied a little bit of poetry, in primary school, but I never really went that far into thinking of the different styles and stuff, and I sort of developed it on my own through I wrote a poem one day and I sort of liked the style. I was pretty angry that day, so I just sort of rambled in my poem, and I've sort of developed this ranting style in my poems, I guess, and I discovered recently through the Australian Poetry Slam that it's called slam poetry, and that's just a style where it's sort of free-form spoken word. So I guess it's slam poetry, but it's sort of taken on its own style, I guess.
So how did you find WA Poetry Inc., or how did they find you?
It was actually about halfway through last year, and I started really writing more and more poetry, and I was just reading it to my family and putting it a little bit on Facebook, and I found myself one day really wanting to find a group or something, and I said to myself, Perth's pretty diverse with its arts lately, there's got to be something. So I literally googled Perth Poetry Club, and the first thing that came up was the Perth Poetry Club. Held at the Moon every Saturday from 2 till 4, and I went there like the same day and just read one of my poems, and I found this amazing group of people that share such a diverse array of poetry, and it really helped me sort of come into my own with my poetry. And then from there I entered poetry slams and got invited to do this festival.
That's really great. I know that you have a YouTube channel. Did you want to tell people what your YouTube link was, or your channel name?
It's called Poetic Justice, and I just record all my poems that I usually perform at the Poetry Club and put them online for people to see.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We're going on a break, but please stay tuned because we're going to come back to the Piazza, and it's a place where you can buy these awesome books.